Hey guys, what's up? It's me, PeakBoy25 here, and today I am bringing you the top 15 coasters at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Now, this is a park I visited in July of 2017, along with two other parks, Knott's Berry Farm and Universal Studios Hollywood. I will be doing a countdown of Knott's Berry Farm eventually, but not of Universal Studios, because just dark rides and two, because one family coaster, Revenge of the Mummy. Yeah, stuff like that. But here I am here today with arguably the flagship Six Flags park, Six Flags Magic Mountain, home to the world's most roller coasters in one park, only one of which are outstanding. We're going to do this. But before we start, I'm going to have a couple things to point out. We're not going to be including the 4 kiddie coasters that currently reside at Magic Mountain: Canyon Blaster, Magic Flyer, Speedy Gonzales Hot Rod Racers, and Roadrunner Express. We're not going to be including any of those. Far too similar. I did not ride them, and they would pretty much, they guarantee place in the bottom 4, positions 19 through 16. Also, this video contains a high dose of opinions, lethal to those who are sensitive to opinions, the potent idea of them. I think Six Flags Magic Mountain is one of those hard parks. Like, it's extremely difficult to definitively rank this park with so many rides that have just mixed consensus, like X2, Apocalypse, Full Throttle, Krypton, all sorts of rides that have mixed consensus that rank everywhere. Goliath has mixed consensus. So many rides that just are not concrete ranked. It just comes down to personal preference, whether or not you favor intensity, you favor just having fun, you favor loopy rides and versions, or just if you want the uber smooth rides, if you want airtime, all that fun stuff. So this is gonna be this was extremely hard for me to rank, especially towards the middle, the high tier coasters. You'll see them. I'll tell you when it starts to get really hard to rank. They're so close together to each other. It's kind of crazy, but yeah. With that out of the way, let's go on. Number 15 is Gold Rusher, an older era mine train, and it sits pretty much dormant in the middle of the park. You're trying to get from Apocalypse to Justice League, or Apocalypse to Riddlers Revenge, or Apocalypse to Scream Punk District, or just, and you need to pass by this thing, or to get from Apocalypse, or you could just bypass the Apocalypse and this thing by taking the little pathway that has Ninja and Escape from Krypton on it. But yeah, this thing's here. It's not that good. It's a mediocre, middle of the pack mine train in my opinion. The layout is a bit. It does have some good drops. It's some good terrain interaction, I would say. But it's, as with most mine trains, it's pretty jerky. It's not the most comfortable. This thing does not have automated lap bars, so they have to push a pedal to open up the lap bars in this thing, so it's that old. So efficiency is not the best when it comes to offboarding riders. However, this ride is often a walk-on. This ride, it was a walk-on for me. I got hopped right into like the 6th or 7th row. Just got a ride, got a rep, and just took the credit and left. It's nothing extraordinary. It's the worst coaster in the park, but it's not unbearable by any means. It's a bit uncomfortable, but it's not like one of those coasters that will go down in history for being absolutely awful. Number 14 is Green Lantern First Flight. My first ever Zack spin left a bad taste in my mouth and a lingering pain in my shoulders. Like, my problem with this thing is that it's it's quite uncomfortable and just does not feel natural at all. And there's trims in the middle of the ride that just slow you to a complete halt. Like, you just stop. There's nothing. It's eerily reminiscent of another coaster in the middle of the park, or the middle of the pack or something. Eerily reminiscent. If you don't know what I'm hinting at, it's Goliath. The ride's a 5-minute wait. It was, or at least when I went. The queue was nothing. It was a 5-minute wait to get on. Got on, I think the side that was, they got on the left side. I think I was facing forward going up the lift hill. If it, I don't know. I was facing forward out of the station. I think it was justified. I would wait 5 minutes to ride this thing again, but I have a lingering feeling, knowing what this thing is like, I feel like I might like it a bit more than I actually do. The turns were they were uncomfortable, but they were quite forceful. A lot more forceful in these free spin turns. These SNS 40 free spins. This thing does have more intensity than the free spins. I will give it that, but the whole thing was just uncomfortable. The whole concept of spinning freely only off weight distribution makes the whole ride, It's like, it's not the most comfortable. You could be upside down half the ride, or unlike my ride, you were only upside down when you started gaining speed, and it's just uncomfortable. I don't really like this thing, and I don't know why. I mean, it can stay, I guess. I don't know. I have so many weird opinions on this ride. 40 coasters are just generally mixed consensus. In my opinion, is that I do not like Green Lantern First Flight. I don't like it a lot. And I mean, I'd say that's saying I would, if I did ride it more times, I think I would like it a bit more than I did. It just was uncomfortable on the only time I went on it. I only went on it once. Number 13 is Viper. Long story here, I went into this with exceedingly low expectations. If you saw my predictions video, I was anticipating this to be one of the worst coasters I've ever ridden, based off so many people calling it, oh, it's absolutely awful, absolutely miserable. But I actually really like this thing. Not like it's not in my top half. But it's the favorite or second favorite aero looper I've ever been on. It's competing with Carolina Cyclone, because Carolina Cyclone's actually really good. I think the main pros were pretty slim over-the-shoulder restraints, and the trains were quite roomy, because other arrows like Vortex and Demon and other like that gave a guy like me, who's 6'1", mostly in the legs, just not a lot of knee room. So my shoulders were hurting, my head was hurting, and my knees were hurting. But Viper was actually quite roomy. I don't know why. I'm actually on the side that likes this thing to be continuously preserved. I want this thing still around. Ace it or replace it. But I'd rather see it be aced. It's the last remaining Aero Mega Looper. Only 3 are ever built, and it's the last one remaining, the last to be built, and the last one standing. And I really think that it's not as bad as people make it out to be. I think they should ace this thing. This thing is a piece of coaster history, and it should stay. I don't know of any coaster at Magic Mountain. I think Revolution has an ace, but I don't think anything else. I think so. It might be the second or third ace at the park. I think it's only the second ace at the park. So yeah, it would be a really good ride. And also, just a little fun fact: if you had told me that a month earlier that I would have supported the continued preservation and would have told me that I actually would have liked it, I would have adamantly denied that. If you told me that a month ago from the video that's uploaded, I would have said, "Oh, this thing's gonna be absolutely awful. I'm not gonna like it at all." Well, goes to show what a rep is like. You cannot judge a coaster just by its cover, by how it looks, and just by public experience. It's not as bad as people make it out to be. I found Vortex worse, in my opinion. So yeah, that's that. And we're gonna move on to number 12, Revolution. Now, technically, it's called the New Revolution at this point, but I just calling it Revolution because that name is just terrible. The New Revolution, it's like New Texas Giant. Both of them are just terrible names. I think this is still a good coaster. It's right in the front of the park. The loop and the fountain make a good front plaza. There's a couple problems with the ride. One, the obvious addition of VR. This is the second season of doing VR, and it's still awful. I got in the queue for this thing before the park even opened, and I still had to wait 15 minutes for it, for the front row, because VR took 5 minutes to dispatch it. It was terrible. Like, I don't get why they continue doing VR on the thing. The ride's not even that good as well. It's alright, but the ride's basically an element, or an element or two, followed by a trim. Whether it be like a flywheel trim, or some sort of chain trim, something that just slows the ride down. This thing is so heavily trimmed. You probably got a helix, or a turn, or a drop, and it's followed by a trim. I can say the same thing about Whizzer, but I actually like Whizzer. Like, I don't know. This thing is... Yeah, I like it, but it's not the best. Both Schwarzkopf loopers I've ridden are better than this, which are Super Duper Looper and especially Scorpion. And number 11 is where we strike controversy. I'm just going to follow through with that. X2. Number 11. Here's my condensed story. I waited 30 minutes for the third row of the inside seat with slow dispatches. I was quite confused and nervous going into this thing. Some good thrills. Came off not knowing what to think. And I still don't know what to think to this day. That's it. I think the ride perfectly entails its name X2, especially the X part. This ride is literally a variable of X of whether or not you like this thing. Two, of course, two sides, two seats per side, or two seats per row, two sides and a winged seat, or whatever. It's... I don't know, it's just a variable. This thing is literally just a variable. I can fill in X with, I like it, it's okay, it's awesome, best ride in the park, worst ride ever. You can fill in the variable with so many things. But just, I'm on the side of like, it's alright, but I don't know what to think about it. This is another confusing ride in the park. And, of course, I like what this ride attempts to do, I will say that. The rotations are far from natural, though. It uses a, like, stick and pinion, or whatever it is. It's basically a gear and a stick that ticks as the rails go on. And the rotations do not feel natural at all. You feel like you're pulsing on every rotation. Like, you're moving back, but while doing so, you also have a couple extra movements going back and forth. So it's like you're rocking back and forth, pulsing the entire time. And the ride just shakes as you rotate. You don't know what's going on. And I like that feeling of being out of control, but I'd rather do that in like a GCI, where there's just relentless pace. I'd rather be out of control. I'd rather have an out of control feeling of Renegade. You are truly at this thing's mercy when you ride it. I like this thing and dislike the thing at the same time. I'm just generally confused on what to think. This ride is unlike anything I've ever ridden, and I don't know what to think about it. Please, give me my entire life and a couple extra re-rides to process this. I rank my rides based off optimal experiences. And the optimal, I did not get the optimal, but I got pretty close to the optimal. And also, I have a cousin, 4th row, inside seat, said it was one of the best rides in the park he was on. He's GP. My brother and my younger cousin that came with us, they got the outside seats. My younger cousin sat next to me, and then the 4th row front seat was my little brother. And both of them were just beaten on the ride. Especially my younger brother, 4th row outside seat. I feel so bad for telling my little cousin, I get the inside seat. He's like, okay. He doesn't know what's coming for him. I don't know. I have policies where if a ride's only good, like if it's a bad ride, except for like one place, I don't really think the ride's that good. Like B&M Hypers, they're good in every row. Like they're still fun in every row. This thing you get beaten in the outside seats and towards the back. I'm moving on now. I don't want to talk about this thing anymore. This thing is just beautiful to look at, but it doesn't ride like it. Ninja is my number 10. And this is actually my favorite aero suspended coaster. I'm going to say that right now. This thing actually is momentum based. It does not stay slow like Iron Dragon, and it does not have an initial first drop that gains all of its speed at once like the Bat. But it gains speed throughout the layout. This ride's basically like a downhill sled, if it makes sense. I mean, the whole park is kind of on a hill. It's Magic Mountain for a reason, and this is on a hill. You go downhill towards the log flume, and the interaction with the terrain is pretty great. I like how just aggressive the back half is. The opening's like a prelude, it's slow and graceful, but the back half is just heavy metal. You're just rocking back and forth, going really fast. My only gripe is an anticlimactic ending, where basically you end the ride with a lift hill. I don't like that. I get that it gives you extra layout, because this thing only goes up like probably 50, 80 feet. Not that tall at all off the ground, but you go down so much lower than when you start. And I love that. This thing was very fun. I think it was better than the Bat because it's just more aggressive towards the back half. You're rocking all over the place. Those turns are ridiculous. You gain so much speed. It's just momentum based. No trims at all. And the ride actually feels pretty long as well. Unlike the ride experience feels pretty long, unlike that. I'm going to move on now to number 9, Riddlers Revenge. Now, I honestly don't have a lot of words to say about this thing. Stand up, large layout, 6 inversion layout. It's quite good for what it does. Still be better if it was a sit down, but I mean, there's no point in making this thing a sit down with Scream, a better sit down coaster, and floorless. Not even a very far walk from this thing. I mean, I wrote exactly how I thought I'd ride. It met expectations, made top 10, was a second row walk-on. What more could I ask for? What more could it be? Like, this thing would be better if it was a sit-down, but doing the whole layout standing up was pretty fun. Also, when I went, they actually repainted this thing recently. It's not green and black anymore. It's actually green and yellow, which doesn't look as good in my opinion. It's the supports are now yellow instead of green or black. Track's still green, but the supports are now yellow for some reason. I don't know. It was really weird. And now we're gonna follow this up with another good B&M. We're gonna go with their Batman the Ride clone. Yes, it's another Batman clone. Just the only difference to my home one, the better one in my opinion, is it's not as good with the terrain. Like it's basically just over gravel or something like that. It's kind of ugly. No theming, or less theming, I should say. Like Great America has a fountain up front, and they have a police car in the queue, and the microwave oven's a little better. Also, it's black and blue instead of yellow and black. I mean, I think this one's slightly inferior, mostly because of terrain and just beauty. And I think Great America is a bit more forced, like a bit more snappy, a bit more intense. This thing still makes you have those tingles in your feet. But it's still, like, I think I prefer Great America's, mostly for the terrain. But other than that, there's not much to say about it. And my wait was like 10-15 minutes for this thing. Not much at all. Also, typical slow Batman the Ride operations are on this thing too. That makes it even more wonderful. Number 7 is Superman Escape from Krypton. This ride does go very fast, but you don't feel it because you're backwards. There's no wind. Launch is not forceful. Spans half the width of the park. And, you only go 3/4 of the wall. Like, this launch doesn't feel like a launch, it's a runway. You're just gaining speed with no changes in forces. You just feel the motion. You just see the track going further and further away from the station, and you feel like you're moving a bit. But the launch is pretty forceless, in my opinion. And you only go, like, I like how you go up the wall. You only go 3/4 of the wall, but you get, like, good airtime. That's about it. You fall to earth, and you hit the brake run, and it's, like, really short. And of course, it's meant to be, of course. This thing is, it's just, no, I was expecting a lot better from this thing. I was surprised at how forceful the launch was. If the launch had been forceful, if I had, like, grayed out on it, if the trains had been facing forward, I think this thing would have been, like, top 5 in the park. I don't know. This thing was just underwhelming. Like, this thing was just kind of, I don't know. I like the speed, but you don't feel it. I like the negative G's in the wall. That was really fun. That's the best part of the ride, going up that vertical spike, just feeling negative G's. I think it's better than some, unlike inverted coasters. If it was inverted, it'd be doing it better. Like, I think you get better airtime on V2's back spike. I don't know. This thing was just kind of disappointing. But it's still really fun. I waited like 15-20 minutes for this thing. And it was worth it, I guess. Number 6 is Scream. It's a good ride, but it's infamous for one thing. And no, it's not it's not because it's like really rough, really smooth, it's just butt ugly for being on a parking lot. Which I can affirm, this thing is literally on a parking lot. There is no terrain interaction. You are literally just over concrete. And honestly, the thing that surprised me most about this ride, I was expecting an okay wait for that. Batman was 15 minutes. This thing was a walk-on the front row. There was literally only 8 or 8 other people. Like a few people in the back and a few people in the second row. That's about it. At 2 p.m. 2 p.m. I mean, it's definitely worth the wait. And if this thing is really easy to hit up for the first thing of the day, because this thing is like, empty for half the day. The ride's great, smooth, it's pretty forceful, and the elements are pretty nice. And the ride, I think overall, just gets a positive rating for me. It's underrated. Scream's really good. I think I like Krypton Coaster a bit better. Like, this thing does pack some good forces, but Krypton Coaster I think is better. Really large loop, terrain interaction, just a more unique layout. but mostly because of the terrain interaction, and I think it was a bit more forceful as well. I don't know. This thing is pretty fun though. I really like this thing. And it's surprisingly beat out Krypton Coaster. Number 5 is Full Throttle. Now I have a lot to say about this thing. This ride has the tallest vertical loop in the Western Hemisphere, 3 launches, 1 of which are backwards, and absolutely 0 changes of height whilst going down a drop. Basically no drops. The best drop is either going through going down the loop, or going down the dive loop. Literally the best drops are inversions. That's about it. There's a whole plethora of things wrong and right with this coaster. I love the inversions. The loop and the dive loop are all fantastic. The backwards launch is incredible. You get some good air towards the back on that dive loop. That is incredible. And the double-sided track. I really like the double-sided track. I hope we can see more of that in the future, because it's incredible. However, there's some really noticeable cons. You can't choose your own row. You get bulky shin guards, like there are bulky shin guards. Uncomfortable forces on the brake run / drop hybrid. Absolutely no drop to begin with, and a surprisingly forceless launch. I did not gray out on that launch, and considering I rode Accelerator a couple days earlier, this thing is inferior to Accelerator. Like, this thing feels like they were just digging for a credit. Like, they needed they needed a full circuit launch coaster, but it just doesn't. It feels like half a coaster, to be honest. This thing, it could have been so much more. I mean, it just does feel like half a ride. It's the whole start and stop mentality. You get launched through a loop, go through a turn, go through a dive loop, stop, backwards, forwards, stop. Basically, that's it. The ride is just 2 separate experiences, like start and stop. It's red light, green light, the ride. It's still a really fun ride, though. That loop, that dive loop, they're both in the backwards launch, they're incredible. This thing's quite picturesque as well. However, this thing does frequently draw one of the longest lines in the park, along with X2 and the next entry, Goliath. Anyone for a ride on the GP Mobile? No, seriously. This thing is the definition of the GP Mobile. This ride is featured in by far the most advertisements for the whole chain of Six Flags. Even for parks like St. Louis, America, and yes, my home park, Great America, they use Goliath as the coaster in the advertisement. It's incredibly misleading. And this thing isn't even that incredible. I mean, I like it because of like that group raging bull mentality. I seem to have a knack for disappointing hypers. And this thing surprisingly gets the longest lines in the park. Like, this thing was easily a half-hour wait. And this thing can reach 2 hours on a busy day. Frequently. Like, this thing attracts all of the GP. This thing is a GP magnet. About the actual ride, drop's fun, speed's great, the airtime doesn't exist, the mid-course brake run kills all sort of speed and momentum, it's an effective anti-physic, and the forces in the back half of the ride make you black out in an empty stomach. And it's pretty smooth. I like this thing. And the graying out and the double helix in the back was, like, incredible. And I was in the 3rd row. This thing was really fun. But I always scoff at this thing just because it's just, the steel is magnetic to the GP. I rode it for the credit, and I'd probably ride it every time I'm there if the line's decent. But I'd probably avoid this thing if the GP is all there at once. This thing is surprisingly, like, there are better rides in this park. There are 3 better rides in this park, in my opinion. Arguably, some would say, like this park is just GP coaster central. I'm just going to move on. I'm just going to leave the GP Mobile and actually go to an underrated good ride, Apocalypse. Many consider this one of the weaker GCIs, and I will agree. It's probably the worst GCI I've been on, other than Roar at Six Flags America and Wildcat at Hershey Park. Like, it's kind of easy to agree that those ones are terrible. My favorite thing about this ride is I can make unlimited Arnold Schwarzenegger or Terminator references without regard to its current theme, considering the ride used to be themed to the Terminator Salvation movie. Other than that, the ride's really smooth. It's quite smooth with the recent retrack. It's got some good moments of airtime. It's fun, fast-paced, some good turns, good forces, a great station flyby. You can just scream profanity as you fly past the people and hope they hear you. It's kind of funny thinking about that. Like, this thing's incredible, and I love this overhead shot over here. You can see everything. The drop is, like, kind of eh. Like, the drop is almost like it goes back into the lift hill. This thing is just really fun, though. It's probably the weakest GCI I've been on, but this thing's really fun. And with this thing used to be terrible with its original GCI thing. It did not used to be smooth at all. But the retract over the past 2 years has really worked out for it. So yeah, I'm gonna move on to number 2, Tatsu. The best flying coaster I've ever been on, or the best flying coaster ever, takes the second spot for Magic Mountain's power rankings. The ride trades grace, or at least some of it, for some pretty decent intensity, some extra 0G rolls, nothing wrong with 0G rolls on a flying coaster, and a wonderful interaction with the hilly terrain of Southern California. This ride is nothing short of fantastic. Like, I think this thing is probably the best flying coaster around. It's pretty aggressive as well. Like, this thing is incredible. It's quite comfortable as well. A lot of the restraints are like plush. They're like leathery, plushy sort of thing. They're really soft, unlike some of the bulkier Superman restraints that are just hard, cushioned plastic. This thing is like really good though. And that pretzel loop, holy crap, you're graying out on that thing. Because you go so much low, the pretzel loop probably has a bigger dip than the entire drop. This thing's incredible. But it's not a world-class coaster. It's definitely one of the better coasters in the park, but my favorite coaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and most people can pretty much agree with this thing, Twisted Colossus. An RMC conversion of a famous movie star coaster, Colossus, featured in several films, most notably, what was that? Well, like we had Wally World, which one? National Lampoon's, or Lampoon Family National Vacation or something like that. I'm sorry, I've seen the film, but I'm drawing a blank on the title. I've seen it. It's National Lampoon's Family Vacation, something like that. I mean, is it a rough and outdated racer being transformed into the modern masterpiece that is the modern-day equivalent of a Mobius loop coaster racing on both sides of the track. You don't have to ride it twice to experience both sides. You have to ride it only once. And it's incredible. I think the layout is kind of disappointing considering how much the original predecessor had. If you look at Colossus POVs before and after, this thing lost about 1,500 feet on both sides of the track. It's basically just a giant oval layout, but it's incredible for what it does. It's a fantastic ride, packed with airtime, it's pretty smooth, and it's only world class when it's racing itself, which only happens about 5-10% of the time. Unless you get a good crew or a pretty hustle and bustle crowd, which Los Angeles is kind of one of those crowds that's just kind of laid back and weird. And I can tell you that Los Angeles is pretty weird. So yeah, this thing is just... I think my only complaint is that I think there are smoother RMCs. Like, I think this is the roughest RMC I've been on of the three. Goliath, Wicked Cyclone, and Iron Rattler were all smoother than this thing. It's probably in the wheels, it might be in the more aggressive layout, but this thing did have some bumps, some a bit transition issues. I did ride in the back, but I think those other three were smoother in the back as well. I wish I could ride this thing in the front. If I can teleport there and only ride one coaster, I'd do TC in the front, and that would probably upgrade it. But I still think that this thing is really good, but it's, in my opinion, one of the middle-of-the-pack RMCs. It's the second worst RMC I've been on. I take this thing over Goliath because of just how long the layout is. But I think this is a middle-of-the-pack RMC in my opinion. I like Wicked Cyclone and Iron Rattler better than this thing. But it's still the best coaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain. So, with that out of the way, if you guys have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscription. It really helps me out. It makes me feel good about myself, and it benefits you because you get to see more of my content, whether it's good, bad, mediocre, whatever it be. If you subscribe, or comment, or like, you want to see more of it. That's what you're telling me. And I hope you guys have a great insert unit of time here, because I'm not in charge of you. You're the one that's willing to watch my channel, and